Civilization 7 is a good game and one that I've had a very fun experience playing. If I were to leave it a Steam review, I would leave it in the mostly positive category. If you're here for a one liner or an overall summary of Civilization 7 and how I feel about it, I would say this. Civilization 7 is fundamentally fun and entertaining. This has been the best experience I've had in a base version of a Civilization game, certainly better than Civilization 5 or 6 on the day they released. I think most fans of the franchise are going to be able to hop in on day one and find something to really love about the game and find something to really dig their teeth into. Civilization 7 is not without its flaws though, and understanding what those flaws are will go a long way into making sure you know whether or not you'll have a positive experience in the game. While Civilization 7 on the whole is good, every time it flirts with greatness, it's ultimately held back by a lack of quality of life features, some of which were in the previous versions of the game, a user interface that is as inconsistent as it is sometimes just plain bizarre, and some secondary or tertiary gameplay elements that aren't poorly designed but were just implemented in a way that I didn't find very enjoyable. Ultimately, there is far more to like than there is to dislike, and this game at every opportunity overcame its flaws to provide me with a fun and entertaining experience throughout all of the 65 hours I've played so far. I'm going to break down the game and go over each of the gameplay elements and tell you what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy about them. Before I do that though, you should know that I have every reason to tell you this game is amazing and that you should play it. It directly benefits me if people play and enjoy Civilization 7 and watch my YouTube videos, and while I'm trying my best to be as honest as possible, it's not divorced from the fact that I would directly benefit if you enjoyed this game. While I hope it doesn't affect this review, it's important to acknowledge your biases, and you should watch multiple reviews from multiple sources before making a final determination. Civilization 7 fundamentally achieves the only goal I really care about in a video game. It is both fun and entertaining. I've put more than 60 hours of active gameplay into Civilization 7. I've gone through all 4 victory conditions, and at every point I've been having fun, and every time I've booted up the game I've been excited to hop back in. While certainly not perfect, Civilization 7's greatest successes are often found in the biggest swings it takes. To varying degrees, I've enjoyed and had a positive experience with most of the new features on offer. The civilization switching, the 3-age structure and the age transitions that go with them, the kind of retooling of combat with the commanders, the legacy paths, the victory conditions, even smaller things like meta progression I found to overall be enjoyable. All of these features combine to create an experience that is distinctly the next step in the Civilization franchise, while being comfortable enough for returning players to hop right in. On the other hand, the areas where Civilization is lacking are often really puzzling and feel like own goals from Firaxis. While none of the negative issues I had with the game overcame the positive ones, they're definitely present enough that you will notice them when you play the game. I'm used to feeling that Civilization games just feel incomplete on launch, like you're constantly waiting for expansions for the games to feel flushed out and for them to become a better gameplay experience. That's not really how I feel with Civilization 7 though. This game feels more complete than either of those two, and there is tons of content on offer. The things that I didn't enjoy about it have far more to do with the implementation of mechanics within the game, and not that anything is specifically missing or lacking from it. I'm about to break it down piece by piece, starting with our civilization switching, but now is a good time for me to talk about the build and the stability of the game. Now, I'm playing on Steam, I'm playing on PC, and I have a really good computer, but the preview build we were playing on was surprisingly stable. I didn't experience any major game-breaking bugs, any progression glitches, any real performance issues, or any consistent crashes. There were quite a few minor bugs that came up in my gameplay and other folks' gameplay as we were kind of discussing it. Most of those have been sent into Firaxis. Some of those even got patched already in the preview build. Some of those will be in the game on day one. So overall, the build is stable. I would not expect anything major to go wrong, but I would expect that there'll be some minor bugs in the game when it releases on day one. It is now time to talk about civilization switching. I do not want this review to be 2 hours long, so I'm going to go very briefly about what I loved and didn't love about every aspect of this game, just so you have that information. I'll do a more detailed deep dive as we release more civilization content, but this is meant to be an overall review, not something that gets into the weeds of every single thing in the game. I'm going to be consistent with what I did at the top. I'm going to break down each category into a Steam review category that us PC players will understand, and with civilization switching, I am going to give it an overwhelmingly positive. This is the most controversial change in Civilization, and I'm an easy target because I don't really care too much about the historicity, but I found the Civilization switching to be so good, a breath of fresh air for the franchise, and 2 breaths of fresh air in each game. Fundamentally, what I enjoyed most about it was the fact that in each age, the civilization I am using is good in that age, is designed for that age, has unique buildings, has unique units, has something to do in the age I'm playing, but most of all, the fact that I can switch up my strategies by changing civs, civs, I'm also playing against AI that have good abilities in the age they're in. It's unique units against unique units, unique buildings against unique buildings. I can't say enough good things about the civ switching. I'm excited for them to add more civilizations for me to switch into. I understand not everybody is going to feel this way, but I'm struggling to find negative things to say about it because of how much I enjoyed personally the civ switching at the age transitions. The age system is the second biggest swing and the second most controversial change, breaking the game down into the antiquity, exploration, and modern ages. I'm going to give the age system a mostly positive review. I think what the age system does well are thankfully the things you want it to do well. It breaks the game down into 3 parts that do feel individually like their own little mini games, but do feel like they contribute to the whole. I felt like the length and content of each age was relatively appropriate. I felt like the game naturally guided me from one age to the other, and fundamentally the game sold me on the fact that this structure exists instead of playing one linear playthrough. Where the age system let me down was a little bit in the balancing and the pacing, which again, thankfully, are the easiest issues for it to solve moving forward. The age system acts as a soft reset for the player, bringing everyone towards the middle, and this was mostly successful. If I was ahead, I could stay ahead. If I was behind, I was staying behind, but it does kind of reset the game and give everybody a chance to get back into it, making sure you don't just run away with it too early on. The balancing here needs a little bit of work to make it feel exactly correct. I want to say in about 20% of the age transitions, I did have that feeling of, oh, all of that work I did was at least a little bit pointless because some of it is being undone by the transition. What that means, though, is in 80% of the transitions, I felt really good about going into the next age, about the reset, and looking forward to how I was going to reset my empire for my new strategy. So there's a little bit of work to do there to make it fully work for me, but overall I enjoyed it. The thing that I think needs a lot more work, and the things that bring it down from overwhelmingly positive to mostly positive, are the pacing at the end of the ages. The game is trying to force you into the next age at a point, again, so you can't snowball and run away with it. This makes perfect sense, but oftentimes at the end of an age, it feels like I'm not getting to experience the end of the age before I'm just going into the next one. Depending on the legacy paths, I may have fulfilled some of them accidentally, pushing the age forward, and I have to actively neuter my empire just to hold the age back so I can complete the legacy path that I want. If I was ahead in games, I finally got to the end of the tech and civic trees, unlocked all of these cool new buildings and units, and felt like I never had the time to use them because getting to the end of the tech and civic trees helps push the age forward regardless of how the legacy paths are going. If I unlocked some really cool buildings, I didn't even have the time to produce them in all of my cities. I would have to go and buy them with gold sometimes because the age was going to end so quickly. None of these are inherently problems and things that I think Civ 7 will solve eventually, but the pacing at the end of each age just doesn't quite feel correct to me. You saw this as well in the developer live stream where they were playing the game live and they were both going for separate victory conditions, and then it just kind of ended because the modern age ended and it just ended with a score victory even though we had a really good game on our hands. The mechanic itself, not a problem. The way it's kind of implemented and paced at the end of the ages needs some work. For the combat and wars, I'm going to throw another overwhelmingly positive out there. For my personal taste, everything about wars and combat in Civ 7 is better than previous iterations of the game, and the introduction of all of the new commanders is so much freaking fun. I don't have time today to break down every aspect of the combat, but you've got the commanders, you've got the flanking, the squadron commanders in the modern age. Oh my goodness, they're amazing. You got just everything about the combat is an improvement. I enjoyed it. Naval combat is more fun. I'm actively looking for ways to kind of go to war and use the combat system in Civ 7 just because of how much fun I find it. I think the combat and wars is overwhelmingly positive and a huge improvement over previous iterations of the game. The diplomacy system is a new introduction for Civ 7, and I'm going to go above mostly positive but below overwhelmingly positive for a nice even just positive. The system works exactly how you want it to. Diplomacy is now a currency that you can spend in a few different ways. You will never have enough to spend it on everything, but no matter where you spend it, you will get a good benefit. Whether it's city-states, endeavors, sanctions, war score, it does not matter where you spend your diplomacy. I had a really good feeling that where I was spending it, I was getting something out of it, but it always came at the opportunity cost of something else, which is exactly what you want in your kind of grand strategy game decision-making. The thing holding diplomacy back from being overwhelming overwhelmingly positive is just that it's a very simple system. The options are very simple. It's just here's what you'll get, here's how you spend it. Very easy, very quick. I would be shocked if they don't expand on this system in future expansions. I'll happily take a system though that is very simple but very well executed over something that is complicated and has strategic depth, but is no fun to use or play. So overall, the diplomacy system is positive. One of the main aspects of a civilization game, a 4X game, a grand strategy game is the city and empire building. As I've played more and better understood the system, I'm comfortable saying the settlement and city building features in Civilization 7 were a positive experience for me. I really like how builders have been removed and you're kind of using your city growth to work tiles. I liked the rural versus urban tiles and what they were giving to your empire. I liked combining two buildings together to make a quarter and trying to figure out all the adjacencies. I could talk about the city building and settlements forever as they are quite complex and complicated system compared to something like diplomacy, but overall I had a positive experience interacting with that system, learning more about it, and even in my most recent game of Civilization 7, I was tinkering with a coastal city and some of the buildings and found myself really just happy that I was trying to figure things out and strategize. The settlement limit is also part of this, and I found it to be fairly well implemented. The settlement limit acts as a soft cap, so you can go over it if you're in a war and you're taking a bunch of cities. You don't have to give up those cities just because you're at the limit, but there is a happiness penalty for going over. I found this penalty was good enough to stop me from going over too much, but if I wanted to hover one or two cities above, I wasn't overly punished for doing so. I found it best to play the game at the settlement limit and then play wide or tall between that. If I had 12 settlements, I could have 2 cities and 10 towns or 10 cities and 2 towns and kind of configure what I wanted to do there. But if you are a fan of just purely tall gameplay, only having 4 or 5 settlements, I'm not sure in this version of Civilization 7 that's going to work, but within the settlement limit, I found play at the cap, play close to the top, and go wide or tall within it was a good way for me to approach it. That's a good segue for me to talk about towns, which are also part of this. I think the way towns are implemented instead of just only having cities has also been positive. I'm frequently trying to strategize about how many big cities I want versus how many little towns I want, supplying those big cities with gold or food or whatever I can get those towns to do. I find there's good strategic depth there. I think there are some wonkiness, some things that are weird on the margins. I find it weird that when I go into someone's empire and I'm at war with them and I take their city, it becomes a town because it's a city. I just took the city. I don't know why it has to become a town. So there's some weird things on the margins there, but overall, the way the towns are integrated into the city planning has been really fun and a really positive experience. At this point in the review, we've mostly covered things I felt broadly positive towards in Civilization 7, but I said this game had flaws and I meant it, so let's talk about the AI. I don't think the AI in Civilization 7 is specifically worse than it is in Civilization 6, but I would have expected a greater improvement considering there's been 8 years since these two games have been released. In every game, there's usually one leader and civ combo that figures it out and gives me a challenge, while the other 3 or 4 just kind of exist. The only time I think the AI is offensively bad is when they're trying to use army commanders in combat. Sometimes when they're trying to figure out how to build a navy and settle on like archipelago maps, things get a little bit weird. But overall, I just think there's no improvement from 6 to 7, and that's a little bit disappointing. There are still half a dozen times in Civilization 7 where I look over at my enemy empire and go, what on earth are you doing? Obviously, that happens more on lower difficulties than higher difficulties, but I was hoping more of an improvement would be made. The AI is nowhere near bad enough to take you out of the game, but it is nowhere near good enough for you to feel like you might truly be outsmarted by them at any moment if they didn't get bigger bonuses for having a higher difficulty level. The AI didn't really take away from my experience at all, but it didn't really add to it either, and considering I was hoping for more of an improvement, I'm going to leave the AI a mixed negative review. While I'm chatting about things I intend to leave a negative review on, let's talk about the user interface. I've been trying to stay out of the online kind of vitriolic conversation about the UI because I didn't think it was helpful, and I wanted to see what would happen to the UI between when I started the preview process and the day 1 patch. I think there are some redeeming qualities to the UI. I think it'll be great for console players, I think it'll be great to use on a controller, and I think it is much more simple than the UI in Civilization 6, which will be more easy to use for newer players. I could not possibly go into every example, but overall, I just think the implementation of the UI in Civ 7 is frankly just quite bizarre. I very rarely feel like I got all of the information I needed that the UI should be telling me. There are frequently times in the game where I'm like, why isn't the UI telling me this, such as having trade routes connected to your empire? I have no idea how to tell if a city is connected just by looking at the cities, which is very strange because that was a feature in Civ 5. There's also not a lot of clarity in the user interface in a lot of instances. In Civilization 6, everything was very colorful. All of the purple stuff was theater squares, all of the blue stuff was science and campuses. Everything in Civ 7 is the same color, and it's the same blocks, and it's the same text, and it's the same everything, and it makes it really hard to distinguish what is on my menus. There are also very few nested tooltips, which I view as a crime against user interface in 2024. If a game is complicated as Crusader Kings can come out and have nested tooltips for literally everything in it, I don't see a reason why I can't expect the same out of my AAA Civilization game. I couldn't possibly go over everything in the user interface I wish would be improved, and again, I do think there are some redeeming qualities to it. However, you will get into Civilization 7 for your first time and will run into all of those moments where you go, why isn't the user interface telling me this? I think their intention was in the right place, but I simply think the user interface at this point in Civilization 7 has just missed the marks for me. I'm going to leave it a negative review. We can move things towards a more positive outlook for a moment, though. Let's talk about the legacy paths and victory conditions. I have mixed feelings on the legacy paths and victory conditions that still trend in the positive direction like they did for my preview, but just having more time in the game, my thoughts have become more complex. I think the 4 legacy paths in each era offer 4 very distinct and fun ways to play in each age, and they're all very easy to understand, which I welcome after the fiasco that I think the Culture Victory is in Civilization 6. I like that the legacy paths are dynamic and that you can kind of work on a few at a time, and then as you develop a strategy within each age, you can kind of go for that strategy while having a few options available. I think a lot of the issues I'm having with legacy paths are how they affect the age progression. So maybe that's just being mixed in with my complaints about that earlier, but I find that I'm accidentally fulfilling goals in legacy paths that I don't want to complete. For instance, in the Antiquity Age, one of the legacy paths is to build 7 wonders, but there are checkpoints along the way. Even if I'm not building 7, it's likely I'm going to build 2 or 3, but because that pushes the age forwards, sometimes I'm disincentivized from even doing that because I don't want the age to end before my next thing comes online. Whether they balance it on the legacy path side or on the age progression side, I think the way the legacy paths tie into the age progression needs quite a bit of work for me to feel fully comfortable with it. We'll talk about replayability later, but I think if the game is going to get stale in any area, it also will be these legacy paths. Now, to be fair, it's not like the victory conditions in Civilization 6 were ever changing either, but the legacy paths are a little more simple. They're a little more easy to understand. They're a little easier to kind of shoot towards, which I think by hour 200 or 300 might add a little bit of boredom. In the future, I'd like to see some options as we get maybe into expansion territory where you can select which legacy path goals you have for each age, just to kind of spice the game up a little bit. Right now, I don't have any specific issues, but I'm just foreseeing that being an area where I get a little more tired of the more I play. On that end, what happens when you get to the end of a legacy path? You hit a victory condition. In the modern age, all 4 legacy paths are fun. Going down each one to the victory condition is a good time. Getting to the victory condition, though, is a mix of a monumental achievement and a little bit of a disappointment. The victory conditions themselves are fun, and it still feels really fun to win a game of Civ because of the effort required to get there. However, I'd be lying if I didn't say the victory conditions were a little bit underwhelming in their implementation. So many of them just boil down to projects, and I think that's most successful in the culture one, where you are building like a world wonder as the capstone of your empire. I think that's less successful, for instance, in the science one, where you're kind of just rolling through project while the game is happening and all of a sudden you win. Again, this isn't specifically different than Civilization 6, where the science victory is also just rolling through projects until you win, but Civ 6 doesn't have the legacy paths building up to the grand conclusion of a game, and if that's what they were going for, I think they missed the mark with the victory condition. I don't think a huge overhaul is needed here or anything, and I don't even think it's a specific issue. I just remember getting to my first win and going, oh, I won a game of Civ, and not, oh my god, I won a game of Civilization 7. So I think a little bit of work there to make them more engaging at the very end would be awesome. For the legacy paths and victory conditions, I will leave a mostly positive review. However, I envisage as I play more Civilization 7 by hour 2 or 300, that I'll probably end up in the mixed positive territory. The tech and civic trees are always a topic of conversation, since to be interacting with them so much every game, I wanted to review them standalone from everything else. I'm going to leave the tech tree a positive review and the culture civic tree an overwhelmingly positive review. Again, while I do think there is lots of room for Civ 7 to expand, unlike Civ 5 and Civ 6, I don't feel like this game is nearly as incomplete. The tech tree in each age makes sense to me. It kind of takes the right amount of time to go through. All of my issues with the tree come at the very end, and that's more to do with an age progression issue than a tech tree issue, so I found the tech trees in each age to be sufficient. I really like the balance between the text themselves and the masteries, and how there are good strategies to kind of go for one or the other. I constantly find myself every game finding a new way to navigate the trees, and I've really enjoyed them. The civic tree is an absolute delight. I think in the modern age it gets a little bit convoluted when you have multiple different kind of government ones going on with like democracy and communism and socialism and all the rest. However, having a unique civic tree for your civilization is also a real treat. It gives you a world wonder that you can build more quickly and unlock more quickly, which I think is really fun. Overall, overwhelmingly positive on the civics tree. One of the questions I saw on Reddit that I wanted to answer is how the leaders interact with the civilizations. I've talked about how much I love the civilization switching, but one part of that equation that's missing are how the leader you select interacts with those civs. I'm going to leave a mostly positive review here. I think the leader adds enough flavor to the civilizations to be distinctly different. If you were to pick, Amina Rome versus Machiavelli Rome, I think those are two different playthroughs of Civ 7. I will say, though, I think the bulk of your strategy is going to come from your civilization. I'll put it at about 30% leader, 70% civilization. I think the balance between the leader abilities that you're keeping for the whole game and the civilization ones, which you'll be switching out, are more of a matter of taste. It's really hard for me to gauge how positive and negative other people will feel about this. I feel mostly positive with the balance. I never got to a point where I was switching my civ and I got, oh, my leader's pointless. Why do I don't even care which one I select at the beginning because I want to select this civilization. I always want to balance them both, and I find them both to be important parts of the strategy. Each leader also has unique mementos that you unlock as you play them more and more, and all those mementos, you can use them on any leader after you unlock them, but they're very well suited to the abilities as well. So as you play leaders more often, you'll get little abilities that make them better. So I'm going to give them a mostly positive review. I think this balance is fine. It is, suited to taste though, so you'll have to play the game to find out, but I think it's good. I want to talk now about the maps and the art style, since everybody on Reddit is talking about the blocky maps. I'm going to leave a mixed review here, perfectly in the middle, not mixed positive, not mixed negative, but very mixed on the maps. The distant lands feature and how it's implemented is very restrictive on what you can do with the maps. You can't have these large Pangaea maps because there always needs to be a distant land to go to. While I find all the distant land gameplay to be very fun and engaging and really positive, I think how it does limit the maps is, very mixed. There's only a handful of map types to choose from, and one of them is a Terra map, which kind of doesn't break the game in any way, but it's a different type of gameplay than picking the other four, and the other four have their downside. If you pick Continents or Continents Plus, you are going to get the core gameplay experience. Those are the blocky maps you're talking about, and while I think they might fix the blockiness, I found my most, fun gameplays to be on those maps. I think the navigable rivers and how they come in from the sides makes those maps dynamic, even if they are blocky. The problem is, when you get to Archipelago and Shuffle maps, they're very fun, they're very dynamic, they're very engaging. They're not rectangles at all. They're like large strips with coastline. I found they really elevated the gameplay experience, but at this point the AI is just so bad at playing on them that I don't really want to do anything other than the continents maps. So maybe it's a problem with the AI more than it is with the map selection on offer, but overall I'm just very bleh about the maps. They work, they're fun, they're good enough, but you really do miss that large selection from Civilization 6, so I'm perfectly mixed on them. If you're somebody though who likes a lot of map variety, who likes a lot of map selection, who wants to play on like a true Star Earth map, that will not be possible in Civ 7. If that is a deal breaker for you, and I know that is for some people, Civilization 7 might not be for you. The maps and the maps that you can actually play on and have a good time are very limited. While we're talking about the map though, let's talk about how it looks in game and how it feels to play, because this is where I'm going to get into another negative review. This is going to perfectly attach onto my complaints with the UI everywhere. It's that everything looks the same. I've grown to really love the art style of Civilization 7. My preference is the one in Civilization 6, but I know that's a minority opinion. I think the maps in this game are beautiful, the buildings are beautiful. As you're playing the game, I love that I can interact with the overbuilding and I can see the eras of my civilization. I like everything they've done. The art team has done an amazing job. The map design team has done an amazing job to make the maps look and feel like you're building an empire. The problem is everything gets lost in them. In Civilization 6, I can zoom all the way out on a mod that zooms out even farther. I can go to like Zeus God mode view, and I can see every district on my map. They're yellow if they're commercial hubs, they're blue if they're harbors, they're darker blue if they're campuses, they're purple if they're theater squares. You can very distinctly see what is on each hex from a zoomed out view. In Civilization 7, that is near impossible. The amount of visual clutter on these maps is beautiful and looks great, but really takes away from the gameplay experience when I'm trying to figure out what on earth is on my tile. Anytime I need to filter through the map to figure out where anything is, I have to turn the yields off, zoom in, and like move the map around, which is just very frustrating. The two-part solution to this is unfortunately found in Civilization 6 by making each hex feel distinct from all the other hexes instead of one giant blend of hexes. Whether they do that with color or whether they just don't build to the edge of each hex and live a little border on each one, I don't really know, but the visual clutter is really, jarring. Another way to solve this would be with a map search feature, which was in Civilization 6 and I used it all the time, and it's not in Civilization 7, and I'll get to my review on that later, but that would be a good stopgap into solving this problem. So overall, the way the map looks is great. The way that kind of culminates in a ton of visual clutter, though, I think might be overwhelmingly negative. It might be the only thing I feel overwhelmingly negative towards. I cannot just see the map and understand what is happening without like zooming in and moving things around, and the game provides no user interface or quality of life features like a search to kind of make that problem better. The religion and crisis systems were both systems that I felt negatively towards in my preview, and my thoughts on both of them haven't really changed. Both the religion and the crisis system are actively fine. I don't dread them coming up in my games, but I definitely don't look forward to them either. A good contrast to this is diplomacy. Diplomacy is a simple system. It is easy to engage with, but fundamentally it is fun and adds to the strategy of the game. Like I said, I would prefer to have a simple system that is fun to use and play than a complicated one that isn't. Both the religion and crisis system feel like they add more tediousness to the game without being nearly fun enough to compensate for that. I'm gonna leave them two different reviews though, because I think there are two different things happening here. For the religion system, I'm gonna leave a mostly negative review because they brought over all the things I didn't like about the religion system in Civ 6 while leaving all the good stuff behind. There are some positives. I like how everybody can get a religion. I like how your holy city can't be flipped, but leaving behind the combat or any kind of fun, not overpowered, but really fun, abilities. The religion is kind of just a way to collect relics now, which again is not worth the amount you have to think about it to do that. So overall, I'm leaving a mostly negative review on the religion. The crisis system, I'm going to leave a mixed to negative review. I think the crisis system is fun, and the times where it really worked for me, it did work. This is unlike the religion system, which I feel like never really worked for me at all. However, the crisis system is it's a great idea that just lacks the oomph in the implementation. I think this is something they can tweak without changing a ton. I think the crisis system is something that just needs to be a little more crisis-y or a little bit less work to think about. There's something really good there and something that I really like. They've got all the right ingredients. I think they just put it in the oven for a little too long or not long enough. I'm not really sure. I'm not a game designer, but I'll go with a mixed to negative review on the crisis system. These are both what I would call secondary or tertiary to the core gameplay experience, so I'm glad the gameplay parts that I feel negatively towards are the ones that are least important, but they're still there. You should still know about them, and when you interact with the religion and crisis system, I would be surprised if you loved them. On the flip side, though, all of these story and negative events in my preview are something I would say probably mixed negative towards. However, my opinion on that has definitely changed. The story events are not reaching anywhere near overwhelmingly positive territory, but they are really well designed and they are really well implemented. The team in charge of the narrative events clearly has done a really good job in making sure when they appear, they are relevant to the game you are playing, the bonuses are something you actually want, and they're not appearing so often that you really have to pay attention to them. It's a really good mix, and while I just kind of click the bonus that I want, there is a lot to engage and interact with there without feeling overwhelming. For the story and narrative events, I feel like it would be unfair for me to leave a negative review just because I prefer to click through them. I think if you are there for those events, you are there for the historicity, you are there for the roleplay, I think you deserve to know that I think these will really tickle your fancy. I think you'll really enjoy them. I'm going to leave them a mixed positive review. That's a lie. I'm going to leave them a mostly positive review. Good work, narrative team. Even if I'm just going to click through, I know a lot of people won't. One of the challenges Civilization 7 was very publicly trying to solve was creating less busy work for the player and reducing the amount of clicks. I think this effort has been mostly successful, certainly noticeable, something I feel positively towards, but maybe not in the way they intended. I'm sure you could tell me with telemetry how many clicks it takes me to get through Civilization 7. I don't actually feel like it's fewer, even though I'm sure it is. I will say though that the game at least feels less busy. And even though it feels like I'm making the same amount of decisions or clicking the same amount, each click and decision feels a little more substantial. And I definitely feel that there are less what I would call miscellaneous or just busy clicks. If you're in a giant war with a large army and a lot of units that are not packed inside of commanders because they're actively fighting, it is still going to take you a while to get through that turn. At least once that's done though, you're not being taken to a million missionary units or a million builder units or a million other things that also have a bunch of clicks attached to them. Again, I'm sure with telemetry they will have the data they need to see whether this was successful. I think as an overall feeling, I feel positively towards it. I'm not sure it panned out in the way exactly they were expecting, but I think it's worked overall. I think this does lead into the next problem they were trying to solve, which was how to get the players to finish a darn Civilization game. There's two parts to this, but one is on the tedious clicks front. I think in the modern age, as you are approaching the end of the Civilization game, there is less busy work. However, that age still takes a while. I would be surprised if the data shows that a significantly more amount of people are finishing games kind of more easily than they were before, but I do think the barrier to entry to getting through a whole game of Civilization has been significantly reduced. Less busy work is part of that. I think one of the most successful aspects of the 3-age structure is each age transition does feel like a great point to drop off and pick back up later, so now you're not always getting that feeling of, oh, when is this going to end? How do I know when to like save the game and go to bed or whatever? It doesn't take away from the one more turn feeling at all, but at least the game gives you two different points where you can be like, okay, I only have 4 hours to game tonight. I want to get through one age of Civilization. Another aspect is the tutorial. I think newer players are going to love the tutorial. I'm an experienced player, so take this with a huge grain of salt, but I played through the tutorial in my first game and really loved it. It's well implemented, it's not too much, it gives you the information you need, and crucially, it gives it to you when you need it. It's only going to give you tutorials for the gameplay elements you are interacting with at one given time, and it prompts you to select legacy paths to go down in each age, so it'll give you instructions just for the one you're trying to achieve. Overall, I think the experience for newer players in Civilization 7 is going to be significantly reduced, and over time you'll have more people approaching the game, and you'll have more players getting to the end game. I would be surprised if that happened right away though, as everybody is still learning, and there's a lack of kind of concrete tutorial videos and guides to find online. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the litany of kind of smaller additions to Civilization 7 that I really enjoyed. I won't leave them all here, but I feel positively about all of these kinds of things. The meta progression system is great. The way the unlocks and the profile work I find is really fun. The memento system is wonderful. In-game, the leader attribute system is really dynamic and really engaging. There's a lot of powerful stuff there. You know, powerful enough that I want to think about it and I want to utilize it, but not so powerful that I feel like if I don't utilize it perfectly efficiently, then I'm going to lose the game or whatever. All of these smaller kind of tertiary things that I didn't even know were going to be in Civilization 7, I think are wonderful. I would be surprised if somebody hopped into Civilization 7 and didn't find at least a few kind of smaller features they didn't know were going to be in the game that they ended up really enjoying. I want to chat briefly about the quality of life features in Civilization 7 since I mentioned it at the top of the video. While there are some quality of life improvements in Civ 7, of which I think the army commanders are a good example, the overall suite of quality of life features in this game oscillates between disappointing and sometimes just downright annoying. These quality of life features can be broken down into two different categories, one that I'm far more forgiving of than the other. For some of the new aspects of Civ 7, they will need a quality of life polish, but that's what I would have expected. At the end of the day, Firaxis is only one team of people, and they can only do so much with their game before it has to go out to people eventually, and as developers, they might not even know what players really want. So for anything that's new in Civilization 7, if it needs a bit of a quality of life upgrade down the line, I'm hopeful they will take our feedback and make those improvements. I have far less patience, though, for any missing quality of life features that were in the previous game that the developers know would be helpful to us. While any experienced Civ player is going to hop into Civ 7 and notice immediately some of the ones that are missing, the two that I felt the most were the map search feature and the map pinning feature. I've put thousands of hours into Civilization 6, and both of those are features I used all the time, and trying to learn a new Civilization game without them has made my experience more difficult. I understand that those features weren't always present in previous Civilization games at launch, but I don't understand why that matters for a new game. They made it into the Civilization canon eventually. I don't know where the game design rule is that if a player search or map pinning wasn't in the Civ 6 launch, you can't put it in the Civ 7 one. At the end of the day, I am a player reviewing the game from a player's point of view, and I'm not inside the development process. So whether there are good reasons for a lot of these quality of life features to be missing, I'm not really sure. But it doesn't really matter for this review because I'm reviewing my experience playing the game. There are missing features such as the map search and the pinning that I think are really crucial to the gameplay experience that I definitely am a little annoyed are not in the game. There are some things in the middle like missing Civlopedia articles. It took me forever to try and figure out how the trade route range worked, and that only happened because I discussed it with other people playing the game. I could not find anything in game that would give me that information or anything visually to let me know that information, which is a good example of something in the middle. And then there are things that don't matter at all, but kind of give you the sense that the game is a little less polished than you'd like it to be. Things like naming cities and naming army units and commanders come to mind. For the purposes of a review, I'll say this. Anything that needs a quality of life polish that is new to Civilization, I will not review negatively. I do not think that is fair to the developers of the game, who kind of just need our feedback and what kind of quality of life features we'd want before they can even implement them in the first place. For anything, though, they designed and implemented in previous Civilization games that would have been helpful in this one, I'm going to leave an overwhelmingly negative review. I want to speak now about the overall balance of Civilization 7 because I know that's important to people, and all of the gameplay elements I won't be talking about in this review. This review could be 700 hours long, and that is not the point of the review. There are lots of things that I simply won't be touching on. There's happiness as a resource, celebrations, town specializations, natural wonders, world wonders, and a whole host of stuff in the game that I wish I had time to talk about. Just know that I didn't include them because I don't feel particularly strongly with them. They didn't stand out to me in an overall positive or overall negative way. They kind of just exist within a game that I enjoyed playing. For anything I left out, you can likely say, hey, I bet you VB enjoyed this well enough because he felt positively about the game, and he didn't chat about this. But if you have any questions about a specific gameplay element, let me know in the comments below and I'll try and get to it. Now let's talk about the overall balance of Civ 7. How does everything come together to make the gameplay experience? Balancing a game like Civilization 7 would be nearly impossible for just one QA team. The game will only have been released for 5 minutes before they have more in-game data than 100 QA teams could provide. Civilization 7 is not perfectly balanced. There are definitely things that are better than others and definitely things that need to be fine-tuned. I don't want a perfectly balanced Civilization game anyway, but I think there's a lot of work here to really fine-tune the experience overall. What I will say is that it's not perfectly balanced, but it's not perfectly balanced in the best way possible. While there's lots of work to do on the fine-tuning front, they made the best decision and made sure everything was at least fun. Every leader, every civ, every legacy path, every strategy, every attempt I've made to do something in Civilization 7, whether I got to the conclusion that it was way too powerful, not powerful enough, or just right, was at least fun to try out. I think there are strategies that absolutely need to be nerfed and others that absolutely need to be buffed, and some that are just perfect, and there's a lot of fine-tuning to do in between, but I think the game is in a really great playable state. You will definitely discover things that are far too powerful, discover things that are not powerful enough, and discover all those things in the middle, but the game balance does not take away from the experience so far in Civilization 7. Again, just to be clear, this game is not balanced. It's not perfectly balanced. It could not be perfectly balanced, but they've done the best they can, and it did not take away from my gameplay experience at all. This opinion is completely subject to change as we kind of fine-tune all of our strategies, we find the best way to go through the game, and we find out how the AI responds to the first couple of patches. They've made sure, though, that the game is fun and entertaining. If it's not perfectly balanced, that balance will come in time. It is not something I'm currently concerned about. The last thing I want to address before I get to the end is replayability. One of the big questions among Civ fans who are going to watch a review at this point in time is how replayable is Civilization 7? This is very hard to judge because even after 60 hours, I'm not sure I've played enough to know if this game is truly as replayable as people want it to be. I think that it might be, and I've been very excited to replay it, so I guess on my experience, I'm saying it's fairly replayable. I've done each of the victory conditions now in a full game. I've played through some of them multiple times. I've tried a combination of different leaders and civilizations and mementos and leader attributes, and every time I start up a new civilization, I'm still excited to play it. As we get more hours into the game, we will find out the systems and the parts of it that annoy us the most, that kind of grind on us a little bit, and part of that too is finding out the best strategies. Right now, everything to me feels like an option, because I don't know what's good and what's not good, but once you know what the best strategies are, it's hard to deviate from them, and it makes the game feel less replayable. For now, though, as a layman's review, I've put 65 hours in and don't feel like there's been a hit to the replayability at all, even though I think there might be later. So I think it's safe to say in a review that you'll get to around 65 hours without feeling like the replayability is lacking. What happens after that, though, I'm not sure. I think this game is still going to feel fun and replayable for many hundreds of hours afterwards, but I just simply don't know. I'll mention again that while I think that this game has places in which it can easily expand and add more, it doesn't feel nearly as incomplete as Civilization 5 or Civ 6 did at launch. There's lots to do, most things are quite fun and entertaining, there's very few aspects of the game that are just downright unpleasant, and I've had so much fun experimenting. I've never picked a leader or a civ or a leader attribute or a path or a unit or anything and felt, oh, that was a complete waste of time. I wish I hadn't done that. I feel like I'm talking in circles. I don't know how to answer the replayability question other than I think it's going to be fine, but you're probably going to get to at least 65 hours without feeling a replayability issue at all. That brings us to the end, and the big question, should you buy Civilization 7? Should you hop in on day one? Ultimately, that's up to you, and just for clarity here, I think I've had a more positive time than some of the other people that have been playing the game. I think if you're somebody who likes the Civilization franchise, who is excited for the new game, and who can go in open-minded to the new aspects, specifically the age transitions and the civ switching, you are in for a good time. This game, again, does not feel incomplete, but it does feel like it lacks polish in some key areas, so if you're someone who needs to dive in and needs all of the systems to feel super well integrated, who needs a user interface that is perfectly executed, or any of the other things I've reviewed as negative, if you need those things to be positive, then you might not enjoy this game. I think for most Civilization fans, there is lots here to enjoy. There's going to be something for everybody, and regardless of who you are, there is something you will be able to play and love about this game on day one. I think there's enough that's unpolished or not perfectly implemented that everybody will also find something they don't enjoy about the game, and it's whether or not you can play through that. I think the positives of Civ 7 far outweigh the negatives. I had no issue so far playing through the things I don't like about the game, but that might not be the same for you. Ultimately, I can't make a purchase decision for you. What I would say is it's unlikely if you are a fan of Civilization that you will be just completely let down by Civ 7. I have a hard time imagining somebody getting into this game, playing through a couple times and going, this was the giant waste of money, I hate this game, I didn't enjoy anything that I just experienced. I know that's not a perfect answer, but I think maybe just watch this review. You've now gotten my opinion on the game. Go watch a couple other reviews, read some reviews online, kind of correlate them all together and make a decision. I don't think it's fair for me, someone who does not know who you are or what you'll like at all, to tell you whether you should or should not spend what I think is a significant amount of money on this game. All I can say is I've had a positive experience. I've enjoyed playing it. I think the positives outweigh the negatives, and I think for most Civ fans, they'll have a good time. They'll also have things they need to work through, though, and things they don't love about it, and if that's something you're not willing to work through, then maybe waiting to purchase the game for a sale or for an expansion or for a patch might be worth it. Overall, I'm excited about Civilization 7. I'm excited about the future opportunities for the game. I'm excited about the state of the game on day one, and I'm excited to play it with all of you. If you enjoyed this review, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let me know down in the comments below if there are any other questions you need answered. I would love to get to them. I want to make sure you have all the information you need about Civ 7 before you make that decision to purchase. Thank you so much for watching. This was my first game review, and I'm very, very sick today. My throat is killing me, so I hope I did all right. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.